the Tijuana mayor declares humanitarian crisis due to the influx of migrants. The president's administration is trying to ban some transgender people from the military. And lastly, John Kerry, former Secretary of State, comes out against the migration in Europe. This is A Better World, and I'm your host, Luis Acevedo. Starting off today, we're going to talk about the humanitarian crisis that was declared by the Tijuana mayor today. And the reason for this is because they had an influx of 5,000 migrants coming into their city. And this is an article I'm reading from CBS News, and this is a quote from the mayor. He stated the following: "We don't have sufficient and necessary infrastructures to adequately attend to these people to give them a decent space. I am not going to spend the money of Tijuana citizens." And his federal government isn't helping out at all. Let's remember, too, that this migrant caravan were the people who forced their way through the Mexican border, completely disregarded the rule of the land in Mexico, and just pushed their way through. The federal government stopped trying to prevent them from coming in because they overwhelmed them, and now they're up in Tijuana, almost to the United States border. There's actually been about 500 who have made it to the United States border. Anyway, when it comes to this situation in Tijuana, there's 5,000 people. And the mayor had stated earlier this week that they would potentially need to stay for 6 months. For 6 months. This caused a huge uproar within the citizens of Tijuana. And this is why he's stating that he doesn't want to spend the tax dollars to help them out, because his citizens are already very, very upset at the federal government not doing anything to prevent them from overcrowding their cities and basically making their life harder. Let's not forget, too, that there are some incidents where these people are fist fighting in the streets. I mean, they're doing bad things over there. They're peeing in front of schools. There was an article that we read last week where one of the protesters in Tijuana stated that his daughter saw one of the migrants peeing outside of her school. And they said that they saw gang members as well that were in the migrant caravan. But the media only tells us that these are people who are in distress. They're mothers and children just looking for a better life. They're not violent. They're none of that. Although what has been going on in the caravan has been contrary to the narrative in the media. There have been several acts of violence that have been recorded and shown on Twitter. They have broken down barricades. They have set a Mexican immigration facility on fire. They have done all these things, yet they are not violent. These are all innocent people leaving from a bad situation. While there may be some that are leaving a bad situation and who actually may be truly seeking asylum, there is a hefty majority that are violent and are just looking for a better economic options, which doesn't qualify them to seek asylum. So there's also something else going on with this, not in Mexico, but here in the United States regarding the migrant caravan. Just earlier this week, the President Trump, he actually made it so that way the military, if need be, could use lethal force on the migrants if need be. This caused a huge uproar because nobody on the left seems to want to realize that some of these people are dangerous and do not care about the lives of others. And so what the president is trying to do with this is make it so that way if these migrants act out and want to physically harm our military people, they would have the right to defend themselves. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I hope and pray it doesn't come to that. I don't want anybody getting hurt. I don't like violence. I heard in a Netflix special, it was going over the history of the Hispanics, Latinos. And obviously it intrigued me, being that I'm Puerto Rican, and you don't really hear much about the Latin history. So I watched it, and I can't remember the famous actor who was doing it, but he ended up doing it because his son was getting bullied at school for being Hispanic. And so his father then wanted to do some research and understand more of their culture so that way he could maybe boost the morale of his son. Well, long story short, he didn't really help his son out too much, and his son kind of found his own way, and he ended up saying that, well, Dad, you're all into this military stuff and da-da-da-da. I think violence is the lowest form of communication. And I think he was absolutely right. That's a lot of wisdom coming from a kid. Violence is the lowest form of communication. So I hope none happens on our border. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I hope that we can resolve whatever issues that may come across or may arise at the border peacefully. That's what I hope for. I really do. And for those people who are truly seeking asylum because they actually qualify, that yes, I want them allowed in our country. I want them to be able to seek asylum because that's what it's for. That's what it's needed. Not for trying to get better economic opportunities. That doesn't qualify for asylum. That should not be allowed. So something else that is going on too in the news that is pretty interesting, because the left always talks about the need to bring in more people and allow the migrants to come in and da-da-da-da, the same old narrative. Well, just this week, two former Secretary of States, John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, have come out against the migrations that are taking place in Europe. So in an interview with The Guardian, John Kerry says the following, and I'm reading this from the Daily Wire actually. It says, look at Europe. Europe's already crushed under this transformation that's taken place because of immigration. And he then points out that in Germany, Angela Merkel is weakened. Italian politics is significantly impacted. That's what he said regarding the migrants that are in Europe. And now Hillary Clinton said something as well, which was the following. This is also a quote from the Daily Wire. I think Europe needs to get a handle on the migrations. I think Europe needs to get a handle on migration because that is lit the flame, Clinton said. I admire the very generous and compassionate approach that were taken by leaders like Angela Merkel, but I think it is fair to say Europe has done its part and must send a very clear message. We are not going to be able to continue providing refuge and support because if we don't deal with the migration issue, it will continue to roil the body politic. They're both 100% right. They're 100% right. And we all know Europe is having a very tough time due to this migration wave that is coming through. There are people who obviously, once again, need to leave their area. And I understand that there are some climate change issues that are taking place over in Africa. There are some war issues taking place over in Syria. Totally understandable. So there's a lot of people who are displaced and actually need a new, better place to stay. The issue is that most of these migrants coming over are not assimilating to the culture. They're not. They're not adapting the traditions in these European countries. Now, you might say, why would they need to do that? They should embrace their own culture and they don't need to conform in order to be a part of the nation. Well, that isn't how things work. In order to be a part of a group, you need to give up some of the things you do are going to need to be trimmed down in order to fit into the group. This can be taken to the extreme where you lose your total individuality in the group and you just delve into groupthink. And this could also be to a lesser effect, which we see here in the United States of America. We're all Americans. We all have common values and we stand up for one another. There's a little bit of our individuality taken away so that way we can participate in the larger group, which is the thing that needs to take place in order for a nation to properly function. Now, if you get enough citizens who do not assimilate to those values, then the social fibers within that nation can then be ripped apart because then you have conflict. You have a civil war in your country. That's what creates civil wars, is a lack of uniformity amongst the people. So this is causing a lot of issues in Europe, and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry are acknowledging this. I find it very funny that when it comes to the U.S.'s immigration issues, we don't address the problems. The left actively seeks right now with their new electorates to allow for open borders. That's what they're fighting for. There are several new Congress people who are coming in and wanting to get rid of ICE, wanting to get rid of our borders. That is dangerous, as we've covered numerous times during the course of this week. The people who have run for presidency under the Democratic Party are now telling European leaders that you need to get a grip on your migration issue here, because this is hurting your country horribly. Yet, we completely ignore any difficulties we have with immigration in America, and we don't even talk about the dangers that could come out of the migration caravan that are heading up to the United States. We don't talk about any of the violence that has taken place. We don't talk about them breaking down barricades, forcing their way through Mexico. We don't talk about them burning down. Once again, they burned down a Mexican immigration facility. Not saying all of them are bad, but there are some that are deadly and that are violent and don't care about the rule of the law and don't appear to assimilate to the culture, which, once again, if you get enough people that do not share the same common values in a nation, then your nation will crumble. It will. Or it will break out in civil war, and you better hope you have a strong leader like Abraham Lincoln, for example, that can fix that divide within the country. That's what's going on right now with the migrant issue in Mexico, and this was something John Kerry and Hillary Clinton had to say regarding the migrant issue in Europe. Now, switching pace up a little bit here, the Trump administration has actually tried to bypass the federal appeals courts and take the transgender ban in which they were trying to implement and pass it along to the Supreme Court. The reason they're trying to do this is because when this was proposed last year in August, I believe, the Ninth District Court, which is the same one who stopped the travel ban, is the same one who's stopping the asylum ban, and now they're doing the transgender ban. Mind you, the travel ban was overruled, and the Supreme Court said that the president has authority to do that. So probably the asylum ban is going to be the same thing, which is very misleading, as is the transgender ban. It is very misleading. Now, what they want to do actually is make it so that way people who have gender dysphoria, i.e. transgenderism, or want to have a sex change or hormones implementations, whatever, medication, while they're in the military, not be allowed to serve. People are outraged by this, saying, well, equal opportunities, equal rights, this is unfair, this is unconstitutional. I think what President Trump here is doing is a very smart move. I say this because when people go through sex change, transgender surgery, it costs upwards of $100,000. The United States military has paid millions of dollars for transgender individuals to have a sex change, upwards of like $8.4 million. You may think this is a small amount compared to the total military budget. It doesn't matter, though. That's millions of dollars going towards a mental disorder that we shouldn't be funding. It's not our responsibility to take care of that. It isn't. Also, it isn't discrimination to point out that this is a mental disorder and therefore bar them from joining the military. There are several other mental disorders that disqualify you from entering the military. ADHD is one of them. A bipolar disorder. Any kind of personality crisis disorders will disqualify you. And gender dysphoria, to me, seems that it is a personality crisis disorder. If you do not know what gender you should be, or you're conflicted because you're a man but you really feel like a woman, that's a personality crisis. If you don't know your gender, that is a personality crisis. And there's also anxiety disorders that will bar you from entering the military. So it's not as if this is an uncommon thing and people with mental illnesses get into the military all the time. No, people with mental illnesses actually are significantly not allowed to enter the military. And by applying this rule to transgenders, it makes complete sense because it's millions of dollars in sex changes. There's also a lot of other mental illnesses that will be disqualified as well. Not only that, but the suicide rate amongst transgender people is roughly 49% of them actually suffer, are actually attempted suicide at one time or another. And this is an article from Live Science. So, in the military, there's actually active duty members that are 20.2 per 100,000 of them have attempted suicide or succeeded in suicide. And for the reserves, there's 27.1 out of 100,000 have committed suicide. This is an article from developmentpsychology.org. And so transgender individuals are probably contributing to that number significantly, being that 49% in the normal population have attempted suicide. So I don't really see the issue with Trump wanting to ban some transgender individuals, if not most of them, from going into the military. So that's what's going on in today's news. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. My Thanksgiving was pretty good. Didn't really do too much. We went over to the wife's grandparents, hung out with her family, had some good food, some good conversations. Nothing really worthwhile to share. I mean, it was just the regular dinner. No politics discussions, so that was good because I think we had a few people who were on different sides of the aisle, so maybe things would have been a little dicey if we dived into politics, so that was probably for the best. But yeah, so that's how my Thanksgiving was. It was pretty good. So I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving as well. And if you have any interesting stories to share, maybe leave your comments below. Let us know what happened. If you have anything worthwhile, maybe a political debate that happened at your Thanksgiving dinner that you want to share, that'd be cool. I'd love to hear it. So if you have anything interesting, please drop a comment down below on YouTube or DM me on Instagram. And don't forget to go to the Patreon so that way you can support what we're doing here and get some exclusive material. So that is patreon.com/abetterworld_22. So be sure to check that out. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. Peace.